I think for a long time, the last thing you wanted to hear from brands was a text. Like, it was deeply personal. That was like your friends, your family. I think now with this adoption more and more of like e-commerce, it was almost like a Trojan horse for brands where they were opting in for alerts for when their shipment was fulfilled and when it was going to be delivered. And I think especially for me as like a user, I have two products that are temperature sensitive. So Cometeer, which is like a coffee that comes in these frozen pods, and then Butcher Box, which is a frozen meat delivery. I live in Florida. If that sits out in the sun too long, it's not going to be good for the product. And so getting a real-time update when it's been delivered to my phone versus having to check email, I opted in.
This podcast is brought to you by Bambassadors.com, the go-to platform for e-commerce brands to create video reviews that boost social proof and sales on TikTok and beyond. Get your first video review created and posted by a genuine creator, completely free, no strings attached, and no credit card required at Bambassadors.com.
Welcome to the E-Com X Factor podcast, where it's all about launching and scaling your business using sales funnels, automations, and smart marketing. And now, please welcome your host, the founder of E-Com X Factor, Yaron Bin.
Hi, Drew. How are you?
Great. How's it going?
Awesome. Great. We're already starting with a smile, with a huge smile, both of us. So this is great.
Well, you're calling in from Greece and I'm, here in sunny Florida. So what's there not to be happy about?
For sure. No complaints, for sure. Great. So can we just get started and tell us about Consult PCR and what are you doing these days and your background?
Yeah, no. So I've lived multiple lifetimes in digital marketing. I started the agency 14 years ago. So I legitimately read SEO for Dummies and taught myself web design and was 23 at the time. And, was happy to get clients pay me, a few $100 a month to help them build sites and not advertise on the yellow pages. So it's come a long way since then. And I think we had a couple inflection moments where we could keep being this like jack of all trades, master of none. And it just became overwhelming to keep up with like Google algorithmic updates for SEO or what Facebook's doing over here for paid media. And so we decided probably about a decade ago to focus more on a client's owned audience, because selfishly, I was like, I have more control over this. I know how much traffic you're getting. I can turn that into leads. I know how many leads you have and turn that into customers. And so we were early adopter of Hubspot, kind of at that time. And we became one of 6 platinum partners out of 4,000 in the world. And it was really neat because we could tweak small things that can make a dramatic difference in, the bottom line revenue. And over time, about 2 years ago, with that evolution, we started to, get and dabble into e-commerce. And there's no easier way to track what you're doing and how effective your marketing is than I think in an e-commerce environment. And so that was pretty fortuitous of us because COVID hit and that just accelerated a lot of the adoption. So since then we've worked with about 40 plus e-commerce brands, really helping them turn their audience into revenue and doing that by a heavy focus on conversion rate optimization, email marketing and SMS, so that we can really help, conversion and retention, kind of for brands. And yeah, usually for us, they've already figured out the product market fit and we can kind of come in and really augment and accelerate growth, drive higher profitability off, kind of their main marketing channels. So yeah, it's 14 years later, it's still kicking. So, it's definitely been a lot of fun.
Awesome. Great. And there is I'm not sure if it's a debate, but everybody defines CRO differently. What is your definition of CRO and what does your day look like? What do you focus? Do you have split testing, usability testing, customer experience? So
it's so funny because especially, obviously we're both in the industry, so we can kind of nerd out a little bit. But even when I say CRO, people have no idea what I'm talking about. I still get referrals from friends that they send me and they're like, yeah, they said you do social media marketing. And I'm like, no. And so CRO to me really is, we focus first and foremost on the site. And it's looking for how do we drive that higher conversion? And for us, There's the quantitative side where we look at your data, your analytics, a lot of that primarily being through, kind of Google. But where it starts to blend into this like customer experience is through the qualitative side. And so, for us, we do a lot with obviously like heat map tracking, usability testing, doing, kind of research of, everything from customer reviews, survey data, what is actually happening even on like, maybe their search, kind of bar and function where they're not finding, information as easily as you would expect. And then it's all of our recommendations kind of culminate in the low hanging fruit of like, what is the level of impact and the level of effort? And then we prioritize those of like, low effort, high impact. Let's get that knocked out and then kind of go down the list. And we want it not just to be conversion. That's like the main thing, but it's like add to cart, bounce rate, exit rate, time on site, scroll fatigue, like all these other factors that I think ultimately lift, the conversion rate itself. But, that's the site. And then it dovetails really nicely into shopping cart abandonment, welcome series, how you're engaging, these visitors into subscribers into customers and customers into these evangelists of your product. So we do look at it of like the full life cycle, as well when we think about CRO. So long-winded answer, but, I think it does kind of encompass a lot of different things and touch a lot of different aspects of the brand.
You mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, the phrase, jack of all trades, master of none. And in a way, a CRO to me is kind of a jack of all trades, master of none. Do you agree?
I think I like where like a lot of our engagements are the same. So we know, especially because we work in, 4 core kind of like industries, we do food, beverage, beauty, cosmetics, health, wellness, and fashion apparel. There's a lot of consistency to our process. And so that's been really nice. But we do touch a lot of aspects of the business. I don't think you can just look at website traffic as a standalone for CRO. You have to look at what is customer service telling you, what is sales telling you, obviously marketing being a core, kind of function of CRO. But I do think you have to be a little bit more of a generalist when it comes to these aspects. So to your point, we feel like we're specialists because we don't do social media, we don't do paid media, any of these elements, but you have to, I like it because you really look at the business strategically and holistically of what's going on. And that becomes a lot more fun versus like, hey, go solve this one problem in isolation.
Yeah, I totally agree. And this is also one of the reasons why I like doing the CRO stuff, because you're integrating a lot of moving parts and you have to have like a 10,000 feet overview about the business. So you're not just focusing on one aspect. You mentioned a lot of interesting things, and I wanted to dive deeper into survey data. Can you elaborate about the process that you're following?
Yeah. There's actually a great client example. So we work with a client called Budwater. They're a coffee alternative, big subscription-based, kind of business. And, they have surveys that they've been sending out both pre-purchase and post-purchase. And it's a unique product. I got a lot of adaptogens and things that people don't really, I'd say the general consumer is not aware of. And so what we did is when we first engaged is we just looked at all that data, and there's tons and tons and tons from a survey standpoint. And a couple of things were really interesting where they were noticing some drop off from when, people purchase a product from like month 1 to month 3 and kind of engage us to really understand why. And a couple of things came to mind when we looked at that. One, some of their branding and their marketing was pretty edgy, and it was like, F coffee. But what we noticed, looking at the survey, was like 30% plus actually use the mud water with their coffee. And so it's like, all right, we're already like alienating a pretty sizable, portion of the customer base. So maybe let's tweak some of the messaging here. And if we ask that on the pre-purchase of like, how are you going to use mud? We could then tailor the communication or the recipes of in conjunction with coffee as opposed to a replacement. And then 2, what also was really interesting was they were treating the customer the same, someone that purchased it one time versus someone that subscribed and had been a customer for 2 years. So all the communication, the flows, everything was the same. And one of the main reasons that customers were canceling is because they didn't feel like they could control their subscription. And so what we introduced was with Recharge SMS, the ability to give them an alert and say, hey, your shipment is your product's about to be fulfilled. Would you like to pause? Would you like to delay? Would you like to gift it? Or does everything look good? For some brands, that seems counterintuitive, but we've shown studies that actually increases the lifetime value by like 30%,
Wow.
Kind of a customer, to give that optionality for them to be able to, kind of make those quick adjustments, because, you might just be out of town for 2 weeks, or you might not be drinking it as much. And so just being able to like do a quick text, we noticed really significantly eliminated that churn that they were, kind of worried about. And so that's cool insight that we were able to like gain and collect from that survey data to help inform a lot of these, kind of strategies and what we, actually implemented.
This is very cool. I love this. And we're going to start talking about SMS in a moment, because I would like to pick your brain regarding SMS. But I wanted to ask you in regards to what you said, the segmentation. So did you do some sort of a quiz funnel and segmented people who are interested in consuming it with the coffee or without the coffee? I mean, how did the segmentation look like? What you mentioned in with regards to the coffee, to the people who consume with coffee and without coffee?
So it's kind of funny, and I don't know if you ever get this, but I get it a lot, where maybe it's ego, I'm not really sure, but like we want to show all these like crazy segments and branching logic. And it's like, it's almost Russell Crowe in A Beautiful Mind doing these like crazy algorithms on the window. And then, you have to kind of almost take a step back sometimes and like, is that work worth the effort and kind of the return? And I think where clients know there's so many things that they could be doing and brands, but it's up to us as the consultant to kind of like sequence that out. So as cool as that sounds, it affected the marketing. But to be honest, we haven't done anything with how we've used that data to segment, because they didn't have like the base level flows. So we introduced in the last 30 days, 18 new flows in segmentation. So it was a lot of work, but it was more around trying to get that one-time purchaser into subscriber, and a subscriber, and having that experience where we do like more surprise and delight. We had to prioritize that as like more important to kind of move the needle, where the qualitative stuff of like the survey data and being able to leverage that seems really, really cool in theory, but the implementation of it is a lot. So candidly, we haven't done anything yet that is on our like product roadmap of what we want to roll out, but the transactional data is more informative for us to be able to leverage that for like the email and the communication and contextualizing it, versus if you kind of take a step back and say like, what would we do with that data? I think we'd add like specific recipes and be able to do some like cool things and kind of like tailor it. Does that help as much? I think it does, but it's like when we had like 50 things to kind of prioritize it, it dropped down. I'd say it's like a mid-level, kind of priority, and something that I could see in the next 30 to 60 days us implementing.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, it's very important. Like you said, you look at the effort and the impact, and you just need to figure out and prioritize. I actually saw this morning a quote in the newsfeed, which is back after what happened yesterday. I think it was by Seth Godin. So he said, don't analyze your data if you can't implement based on your findings. So this is a kind of something to keep in mind, because we love looking at the data, but sometimes if we don't derive action items, so there's no point in just looking at the data.
I'm guilty of it all the time. Like
all of us.
I did another one on Friday for a client. They sell these like really cool bomber jackets, and so we were doing like a re-engagement campaign for like, they had like 70,000 plus people that haven't opened an email in a year, and I like brought in our data analyst, and I was like, all right, so we can separate non-purchaser from purchaser. Okay, 50% of the people buy this bomber jacket. What do they buy in conjunction? What is the purchase window? And I did my Russell Crowe impression and had my whole algorithm. And then our retention strategist was like, you do realize like people only open like 2% of these emails. And so you've built like 19 segments now for like, okay, maybe 3,500 people are going to open this email. You go all the way down and you're like, oh gosh, yeah, you're right. So it is like, there's so much data available as an e-commerce brand. You have to kind of figure out what's gonna, move the needle. And luckily I had people that can kind of check me on that stuff.
Yeah, like you said, transactional data is the most important. All the rest, you're not supposed to throw away, but focus on the transactional data. You have enough of gold and gems over there, I guess.
Yeah, there's just that diminishing return. Like I've seen a client that had 17 emails in their welcome series, and we're like, okay, like, by the time they get down to that 17th one, like, is that really worth it? Where, we noticed that you could do the same about 3 to 5 emails, in that sequence. It's going to get like 80 to 90% of the way there. Like, do you really want to go down that rabbit hole? And so I think some people can over-engineer it a little bit too much too.
You have different types of client, different verticals. So you said you have the skincare guys and the apparel guys and different verticals. So I was wondering if you see different trends in customer behavior and retention, and what are your best practices based on every vertical?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have a lot of beverage clients, and that is extremely challenging if their first experience is online, because, now all these seltzers or, sodas or alternatives are like $3, $4 per can. And if they're getting a 12-pack, that's $35, $40 to try something that they've never tried before. So one thing that we recommend for a lot of our clients is like a sampler pack that could be maybe 4 or 6, and they could try like one of each flavor. So your costs are a little bit lower. And then what we notice a lot is once you've got them in the funnel, the likelihood of subscription is significantly higher. And so, so a lot of our brands that are beverage clients specifically have the sampler pack as a way for the customer to experience the product for the first time. And then, really building out flows to get them from sampler to subscriber. Because once you like it and you got a taste, the customer is very open to having it, shipped to them, kind of every month. So that's something I think that's right out of the gate, like simple and easy to implement. For fashion apparel, the customer thank you is incredibly important to complete the outfit, things like that, where, and so looking at product bundling is extremely important. Okay, if you go back to that bomber jacket, it represents like 50% of their sales. Well, what is the second purchase product in conjunction with that? And sending a customer thank you when they're like excited about the brand, they just purchased, they maybe have already had it, shipped to them, being able to complete that with like a hat or a t-shirt, something like that is a really good way to get that first purchase to second purchase. The tighter that window is, the more likely they are to become, kind of a lifetime, customer and kind of increase that. And then beauty cosmetics, where we have a lot of clients, we actually like having a pretty hefty like welcome discount, because then it allows them to try a lot of different products. Like we have one client, Intelligent Nutrients, that has a broad assortment of like different products for different, from hair to skin to body. And so on average, we notice like if we can get a 20 or a 30% discount, the average order count of that first order is like 7 products. And so it's really, really high. And then, we can have some really valuable data to then, kind of follow up with them. And so, a lot of times cosmetics is something that they do want to like put on their skin or their face and see how they react. And everybody has different skin types and stuff like that. So I think offering a discount can be, really, really helpful. And then the last one is health and wellness. So we have a lot of like telemedicine for hair loss to, women's health, and from like fertility to menstrual health and, kind of things like that. And I think the power of reviews and strong content is extremely, extremely important. And you really need to, this sounds pretty simple, but you need to segment your audience as much as possible, where, I think some of the stuff can be overkill in like fashion or beverage, but personalizing, contextualizing the communication between you and that consumer, the last thing you want is to treat a guy looking at hair loss the same way as women dealing with fertility. Like, it's just, obviously you want to have a lot of content and reviews, because it's still, you're transferring an experience that normally happened with a doctor in a hospital room to online. And so so we place a lot of importance in like your welcome series, and educational series and content, and really having separate flows for the product or the service or the demographic, kind of profile that they fall into. So I just kind of rattled this off, but those are like, ones that I think are the four main categories that we deal with and some, best practices that we typically apply to clients.
Nice. This is very interesting. And I think that we can do like a series of episodes about every vertical.
Yeah. And I think brands like to see that we have experience in their vertical and there's not things that some of it, translates into other ones, but I think there's a lot of nuance with each one that you have to take into, kind of consideration.
Some are consumables, some are not recurring, less likely to subscribe. Let's say fashion is less likely to have a subscription ongoing. And I assume that the supplements are a bit higher. The prices are a bit higher. So everything is a bit different. In regards to the supplements, so do you use like VSLs, a lot of VSLs or don't go there?
Again, we'll do some with like SMS and like other communication, and then connecting like the CRM so that if they wanted to talk to a doctor, kind of directly and how to like consolidate all that, it becomes tricky depending on the vertical or the industry with HIPAA and what can kind of like transfer over or not. And there's like gray areas too. So yeah, we built for a sleep product where they had SMS, they had phone. We built it on, kind of HubSpot instance in that case. And then they also they had like the telephone, they had SMS, they had live chat, and they had email. So there was all these different channels, customer service tickets as well. And you want all that data to live in like one spot. So, trying to figure out the right technology stack can be a little overwhelming. And so we can help, kind of navigate that too.
Quick favor, guys. If you enjoy these shows and have been a listener for quite some time now, we would really, really appreciate it if you could take the time to give us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or whatever your preferred podcast app may be. Having lots of ratings and audience feedback makes our show become more visible across multiple platforms. And it also supports our mission of helping as many people as possible to become better marketers and better entrepreneurs. So if you're not driving and it wouldn't be dangerous, pause this thing right now and give us an honest review over your podcast app. And we will love you even more than we already do. Thank you for taking the time, and I hope you enjoyed the show. Normally, the stores that you operate are Shopify or WooCommerce, or not necessarily?
I'd say 80% of the clients are on Shopify. We deal a little bit in WooCommerce, and then we have some BigCommerce clients as well. But I love like our recommended tech stack a lot of times is like Shopify, Klaviyo. They just have continued to release like product updates. They play nice with so many other apps in their ecosystem. The templates out of the gate are relatively easy to, kind of, change and manipulate. So yeah, more and more that feels like most people are on, kind of Shopify. And obviously that's reflected in the stock price and everything else that they're, kind of doing these days. But
so let's talk about the SMSs, which is one of the main topics that we wanted to talk about. So you mentioned this a lot, and I know that a lot of store owners overlook this because they might think that there are a lot of regulations in regard to SMSs and it's a bit less intuitive. But I know there are tools that make it easier, and it's also a great tool with regards to ROI. So can you elaborate a bit about SMS marketing and best practices?
Yeah. So I think it's helpful to understand a little bit of the evolution where I think for a long time, the last thing you wanted to hear from brands was a text. Like it was deeply personal. That was like your friends, your family, and that was about it. And I think now with this adoption more and more of like e-commerce, it was almost like a Trojan horse for brands where they were opting in for alerts for when their shipment was fulfilled and when it was going to be delivered. And I think especially for me as like a user, I have two products that are temperature sensitive. So Cometeer, which is like a coffee that comes in these frozen pods, and then Butcher Box, which is a frozen meat delivery. I live in Florida. If that sits out in the sun too long, it's not going to be good for the product. And so getting a real-time update when it's been delivered to my phone versus having to check email, I opted in. And so that was a very easy way, I think, for brands to begin that relationship. And you're just seeing it now where the comfort level is increasingly higher and higher for users or consumers to be open to, kind of text messaging. So I think that has really helped a lot of the adoption. And then two, there's been just a lot of technologies that have come on board focusing on SMS for even a year ago, and still a little bit to today. It was like wild, wild west. Like if you had any kind of like product in e-commerce, it felt like you added SMS. Like Yapo was doing reviews, they added SMS. Klaviyo was doing email, they added SMS. There's SMS like shopping cart abandonment tools that kind of came up. So it was difficult, but for us, we're a big advocate. We're a Klaviyo Platinum partner, and they've rolled out a ton of new features for SMS, making it really easy to add it to your flows. And so what we've started to do a lot is anything that you send as an email, let's see if we could run an experiment to do it as SMS. And I'd say primarily focused on flows. So welcome series, shopping cart abandonment, browse abandonment, post-purchase, and then all the transactional, like obviously shipping updates, subscription management, delivery and things of that nature. And what Klaviyo allows you to do is to run like very simple and easy split test of like, we're going to send 50% of the people our first welcome series as an email. We're going to send the other 50% as, a text. And let's just see, what is the lift in revenue? Obviously with SMS, you can't track open rate, but you can track click-through rate. And it's the click of a button where, if you have Attentive, it's a little more challenging because you'd have to port and migrate all the data from Attentive into Klaviyo and then, kind of run it. So Klaviyo just like streamlines a lot of that and makes it really simple. And we're seeing just by adding it, not really changing too much, like 10 to 30% lift in revenue coming from email and SMS, just by adding that as a channel. And the engagement's been just through the roof. It's been really, really powerful.
Nice. I want to implement this as we speak. I mean, I used to also use SMS Bump and then a bit SMSs using Klaviyo, but then I stopped. I didn't see any significant improvement. And I don't know why I neglected this, but based on what you're saying, it's like a field of gold.
If you think about it, it's like most of the traffic that you look at mobile is 60, 70%. So you could send the email or you could just send the text, especially for shopping cart abandonment. We're getting a recapture rate, above what you would from email. Like normally you want to try and get like 14%. We're seeing 16, 18%, on SMS. So and Klaviyo's made it very cost effective to be able to do. You can add it for like $40 a month, get up to speed, start running some tests and just see, I think it's a really, powerful way. And what I was talking about with Mudwater, to be able to control your subscription, if you're out and about running errands, doing whatever, you get an alert and you're like, oh, I already have like 2 packages worth, be able to text back, the number 2 to pause, so much simpler than like getting your email, going into your account login, oh, what was my password? You could just shoot a quick text to be able to kind of help, kind of with that communication as well.
This is awesome. And do you have any other advice regarding SMS? So I assume that you also optimize SMS and not necessarily only use the same text as you're using in the email, but how is the messaging different? How is the tone of voice different?
Yeah, so we do recommend that it's a little bit more conversational. And so we have like great copywriters that we work with that you can't even use like, different like acronyms and kind of have GIFs in there when appropriate. I think you have to kind of figure out what is your brand, what is like authentic to your personality, and you don't want it to be, kind of like a huge disconnect. But I think what Klaviyo is starting to do is it could, integration with Recharge, so subscription management, integration with Gorgeous, so customer service tickets, integration with Akendo for like reviews. Like they're kind of being that central repository where any kind of communication, not just email, that is going out between you and the consumer, advocate for having that within Klaviyo, and then looking at SMS as a channel just to be able to like, kind of test and run those experiments. So I think making it a little bit shorter, making it more conversational, but all of a sudden you don't want to be like doing all acronyms and like GIFs if like you're a very formal, kind of brand. So, try and think about ways that it can still be, kind of authentic. And obviously think about you have a much shorter attention span, much shorter, kind of content. So how do you condense it, get to the point, that much faster too is, I think, important.
What about the messenger marketing? Have you seen any significant changes, or are you using this a lot?
So we haven't actually done much. I'm a investor in a fund that invested in a company called Paloma that takes in like Facebook Messenger, can even build like a live chat experience and things like that. It's interesting. I'm long on it in terms of like, if you look at like the lead capture in Facebook going directly to a chat, directly into, kind of a flow or a sequence makes, total sense. It's just, it hasn't been something that we've really done a lot with, but I think it's something that I can totally see us, kind of including in part of our like strategy and recommendations for sure.
I think it was way more powerful a few years ago when customers were automatically opted in under like you were able to put like an automated opt-in under like the add to cart button in Shopify. But since then, Facebook disabled this automated opt-in. So I think a lot of, but for me, when it worked like amazing. It worked way better than like the cart abandonment sequences using ManyChat were much better than the Klaviyo emails.
Really?
But this was back in the days. But these days, I don't hear a lot of people talking about Facebook Messenger marketing so often. And I think it's one of the reasons because a lot of customers are not opting in.
Yeah, that's probably why. Like, because I remember years ago where we were doing some experiment. We did a campaign with the Chargers, the NFL team. We helped them move from San Diego to Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it was, kind of the lead forms and the messenger being able to like, our CPA was like, 10x better using that than a form or, any other type of like email sequence or anything like that. But yeah, we kind of moved away from it. And I think to your point, it was probably around just consent and, kind of the form capture and things like that, where it didn't have that connected.
Yeah, and it does make sense because at the end of the day, you expect Facebook to give you better CPAs or better whatever based on what you're optimizing for. But if people stay in the platform, so if you're lead capturing using the Facebook lead capture option, so you expect to get better leads, but you get just cheaper leads, but the quality isn't there. Based on my experience. So it's kind of the issue.
They all do that. LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, like they're all just like, they want to keep you on the platform as much as possible. And that's even, on Google where it's like, you just see now where all the click data is staying on the Google search results. Mm-hmm. You don't even have to like leave anymore. It's like crazy how much like real estate they now take up where normally you would have to kind of go through it too. So that's why I'm such a big advocate for email, because you at least control, it's one-to-one, that's your owned audience, where Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, you're renting that audience on those platforms, and, an update or whatever, they have control. And that always like, scared me in terms of like a long-term strategy.
Mm-hmm. And this is why a lot of people are saying like the money is in the list. And I hear this very often, and I'm not sure that, it makes sense, but sometimes I'm not sure how many people are claiming that the money is in the list in opposing to people who are willing to be losing money on the front end. So let's say, for example, the beverage company that you help. So they were losing money on the front end, or was they breaking even? How much do you see your clients are willing to pay in order to get the leads?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think there was this like Facebook kind of glory days where they had so much data on their users that they were giving to brands, and the cost for acquisition was just out of this world. And, you could just like create it. Here's the segment, here's the interest, and you're well on your way. Coupled with, the popularity of like the Warby Parkers and the Caspers and raising all this like insane valuations, there was a lot of capital coming in the market. And I have seen a pretty big kind of course correction right now. And this is why, people like us in CRO, I think, are becoming more in demand, because CPAs have gone, through the roof, a lot due to the Apple updates and the Facebook, and the impact that's having on, kind of Facebook. And then I think building profitable models, you would think makes sense, but I think venture capitalists were willing to kind of come in, and they weren't necessarily looking at the unit economics. It was just like the brand and, and just, are they growing, month over month, not if they're growing profitably. So I think there's been a little bit of a reset. And our client, Mobilar, has done an incredible job of like building brand and acquiring customers really cost effectively, and then putting a ton of time and energy into that retention, where, to me, that's why we focus on conversion retention, because it's gonna affect your SEO, your Google search, your social media, your influencer strategy, paid social, like all those elements. If you can get that right, it's like all tides rise, all ships. And that's one thing on how do you acquire those customers, but secondarily, how do you retain them and keep them as, kind of a repeat purchaser, or, increase the lifetime value. So I think there's been a market correction where you could just be anybody, hire your growth marketer, acquire customers really cheaply. That's changed a lot, along with more brands entering the space. Shopify makes it very easy to start a store, good and bad. And then you get these big like P&G, Johnson & Johnson, that are building like direct-to-consumer models too. So, it's this confluence of a lot of different factors that are making it pretty challenging, if you're a brand. So you have to get your CRO in a great plus, you have to get your retention efforts and kind of focus on that, so you know how to cost effectively acquire and retain customers.
For sure. Yeah. And I started as dropshipping, only dropshipping. And I think it was like 4 years ago or 5 years ago. It was like you said, the glory days of Facebook. Whatever you did, you were profitable. And you were profitable on the front end, and you didn't really care about lifetime value because it didn't really matter, because you were profitable with the user acquisition just based on the CPA. But I see things are changing. And as you mentioned, with the update of the iOS, and CPAs are generally speaking are going higher and higher. So if you don't have retention in mind, if you don't calculate the lifetime value, and your lifetime value is kind of similar to the AOV of the first purchase, so I think that you're screwed. The game has changed.
Right. I think there was a few years ago, and I forget who did the analysis, but they looked at the filings when Casper was trying to go public, and they're like, here's how to put it in perspective. If Casper gave you a mattress for free filled with $200, that's what they're essentially doing to acquire customers. And it's like, this is not sustainable. And, you fast forward to today, they've fired their entire C-suite. The market price has dropped from, I think it was like 1.2 billion to now like 350 million. I just don't think it's an effective model that you can hope to follow, of just like acquire, but don't look at it, is this profitable or not? It's just not going to be, kind of sustainable.
And when a customer or a company comes to you guys, so how would you say the distribution of advice between like email marketing flows, implementing them, and in opposing to looking about the customer experience and looking for opportunities with regard to subscription, for example? Is this clear? I'm not sure. Is the question clear? I'm not sure.
Well, because there's like 3 buckets. It's like CRO, which is like website. Then there's a CRO, kind of like email. And then there's like the retention bucket. It's going to sound like not answering, but it really is dependent on the client. And we do impact calculators. So we'll do an analysis based on traffic, where the conversion rate is, their average order value. And, if say like a client's doing 1.5% conversion, they have like 50,000 visitors a month to their site, their average order value is like $80. We know we could pretty confidently get that to 2. The impact on that, if you run the numbers, is you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue. So obviously we prioritize that. If it's email and they don't have like a lot of the base level flows, and they're not like optimized, a lot of this is usually based on how mature the company is, and in terms of like revenue and their development, but not always the case. And they don't have like browse abandonment, or they don't have like a really robust welcome series. And maybe their total revenue from emails like 10%. Most of our brands are doing 30 to 40%. So we're like, okay, we can see very quickly on where we need to prioritize. And then there is that third, in the case of Mudwater, where it's like, they had pretty good CRO. They had good, kind of like email flows and baseline, but it was, they had that drop off on the retention. And so if they can keep that customer and reduce churn by 20, 30, 40%, the impact that has, because they have tens of thousands of customers, is really significant. So that's how we approach it. Each one's going to be a little bit different, but we're all about level of impact, level of effort. We want to get that ROI as quickly as possible. And so we run those numbers by doing that analysis, and that's going to help inform, kind of what our recommendations are.
Cool. Amazing. And what types of brands are you guys looking to partner with? I mean, is there like a significant minimum amount of revenue, or what is the criteria?
Yeah, we kind of have 3 categories there. So we have like an e-commerce starter pack, which is usually like a 3-month engagement. They're like sub 2 million a year in revenue. Like we can build the base level flows that they need. We can do a light UX audit and kind of provide recommendations there, along with like maybe the right apps to use. And then we have, more that mid-market, which is like 5 to, call it 20 million, where it's like, it's a lot more around, we call it, kind of like a conversion SWAT team. We look at the data, come back with recommendations, more advanced segmentation, within the, the database that we can kind of put in place. And those are longer, kind of engagements, and they just, we keep finding low-hanging fruit. Mm-hmm. And then there's like this enterprise, or like almost like heavy retail, where they're trying to figure out their D2C strategy, or they're a pretty prominent D2C brand that has like a very specific project for us, that we kind of bring in our senior level team, and then we can kind of like help. So it does run the gamut of like early stage up to, usually 60, 70 million a year in annual revenue, where they don't have like a data analyst team or a retention manager. Mm-hmm. We can really kind of come in head of UX and be able to add value there.
Awesome. Cool. Awesome. Is there anything that we didn't cover today that you wanted to cover?
No. I think I feel like pretty comprehensive, covered a lot of different things. So no, I really appreciate you having me on. And this has been a lot of fun. It's always fun to kind of like geek out on, these different things and what we're doing on a daily basis.
For sure. Awesome. So where can people connect with you guys?
So Consult PCR is the site. You'll see a little pop-up there. I do a weekly newsletter where I cover like, experiments that we're running for other clients, nice. Brands that we admire, tools that we recommend. It's, almost like a Tim Ferriss 5-Bullet Friday. It takes a minute to read, and, hopefully some valuable content. Mm-hmm. And then, I'm on LinkedIn, usually posting pretty regularly. So just find me, Drew Himel, Himel, kind of on LinkedIn, and connect, and, hopefully, if you have a brand you want me to kind of take a look at, I'm always happy to, give some advice, or, kind of connect with other people in the space. So.
Awesome. Cool. I'm going to subscribe to the list right now. I'm also subscribed to the 5-Bullet Friday, although it has been kind of boring lately.
It has. I'm like, wow, these are like, I thought it was just like a 5-bullet, and it's like, it's a whole story involved.
Comprehensive about, he's doubling down on psychedelics. So
I know. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I've kept mine succinct. I think everyone says like, if it takes you longer than 2 minutes to read it, I'm doing something wrong. So it's short and sweet.
I'm sure it is. So I'm going to subscribe right now, and I'll have the links in the show note. And thank you so much. It was very interesting and a lot of value. I'm going to implement the SMSs right away, and I'll keep in touch.
Amazing. Thanks so much.
Hi guys, this is Yaron again. Just a few more things before you take off. Number 1, if you want to learn more about e-commerce and marketing, make sure you check out our YouTube channel, which is called Ecom X Factor Official. Number 2, check out our Facebook group, which is called Ecom X Factor Marketing and E-commerce Mastermind. This is a great place to ask questions and connect with other business owners. And last but not least, if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to share it with your friends and colleagues, plus leave a review at your favorite podcast app.